So hello and welcome to today's Go Green workshop. Just to say that the cameras and mics will be off until the Q&A at the end. You can use the chat to ask questions and leave any comments and have a discussion as usual. The session is being recorded and we now host some of our videos on our external site as well as our internal site, so just be aware of that. Today's topic is plastic pollution. So what's the problem? Have you ever wondered how it gets into the ocean, where it goes, what it does? And most importantly, what can you do? We're joined by Lucy Deans, who will be answering all of those questions and much, much more. So I'm going to hand over to Lucy now, and she will take you through her presentation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jodie. So quite a few of you have put an answer for your idea of how many plastic bottles there are in this picture. So I spent 8 months in Egypt studying plastic pollution and marine conservation issues in the Red Sea.
Sorry, Lucy.
That's all right. There's quite a few of you put some answers in the poll, and yeah, the answer to this question is there's 1,373 plastic bottles in this picture. Or more depressingly, as it says at the top, this was roughly 200 meters square of beach. That's 7 bottles per square meter. Yeah, I spent a lot of time counting plastic bottles. It's not the most thrilling thing to do, but it gives us, data, and data is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So we're going to be looking at the problem of plastics today. We have plastics everywhere. They are widespread. The amount of stuff I can see on my desk alone made from plastic is incredible. It's lightweight, it's versatile, it's really cheap to make, so it gets everywhere, quite literally. So a very quick overview. It's very, very brief about me. I'm the least interesting thing of this presentation. We'll look at what plastic is, global plastic consumption, how it ends up in the ocean, and issues it causes, as well as what we can do, which I think is the most important thing that I hope you take from this. So very quickly about me. I originally went to the University of Suffolk, where I did a foundation degree in wildlife management and conservation, convinced I was going to work in agricultural conservation, mainly of birds. Then I went off to the University of Cumbria to do a full degree. So I did animal conservation science with placement. There I had to do a marine conservation course. I didn't want to do it originally, but I had to. There was another option, and I fell in love with all things marine. Through that, I learned to dive, and I did a week-long course learning about different underwater monitoring techniques and other surveying techniques. And through that, I found out about the Open Ocean Science Centre in Egypt. So when I had to do my 8-month placement, which we had to plan ourselves, I planned to go out there and start studying marine conservation issues in the Red Sea. I was meant to go to Sharm el-Sheikh. Unfortunately, this was around the time that Russian jet was brought down, so I couldn't go there in the end. I ended up going to Al Khazir, which is in the middle of nowhere, quite literally. I was surrounded by desert on 3 sides and a ocean on 1 side, and the nearest city was 15 kilometers away. It was an experience. It was a real experience, but I learned a lot during my time there. And after I came back, I started doing volunteer work with Surfers Against Sewage, which is a charity that you have to be a surfer. I can't surf, but they promote trying to make plastic-free communities, and that was something I got behind, and I started working with them as a community leader. My dissertation was also plastic-based. It was looking at microplastics and whether they're more prevalent at seabed sediment at shallow depths in the Red Sea. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking. He has opinions. Please be quiet. Thank you. So I unfortunately found plastic in every sample. As you can see, there's 75 bottles there. I used a technique to extract plastic written by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They wrote guidelines, and I used that methodology to extract plastic, microplastics from the sediment. Did find it on all of it. It was very depressing and very grueling, but again, gets us data. So on with the presentation. I'm going to say here and now, this plastic pollution, massive topic. So wide, so broad, so many issues. I can't cover them all in an hour. I could talk for several hours. You'd probably all get very bored. So I'm not going to do that to you. So we'll cover as much as we can in that time. So what is plastic? As we said, it's everywhere. It's basically a family of hundreds of different materials with a wide range of properties. If you think of something like polystyrene, and compare that to something like a rigid plastic, you can see 2 very different things, still both plastic. They are polymers derived from fossil fuels. So often when you think of plastic, people think of oil, but it can also be made from natural gas or coal, because basically these natural fossil fuels, they are refined into ethane and propane, and then those are mixed in various amounts to essentially make polymer chains, which then become plastic. So a quick timeline of plastic. It was actually first created in 1907 by a Belgian-born chemist called Leo. I'm sorry if I pronounce this wrong. It's Belgian. I'm not good. I believe it's pronounced Bakeland. I did look up how to pronounce it, so I'm terribly sorry if I've said that wrong. He basically found a way of combining basically phenol and formaldehyde. He combined them together using different pressures and different heats. He found he could make a solid material that was moldable, essentially, and that's how Bakelite was discovered. He was given a patent for that. Plastic production didn't really kick off until the 1950s, and then it really kicked off. So by 2019, plastic production had increased nearly 230-fold to 460 million tons a year, which is a lot of plastic. So you see on this graph here, 56% of all the plastic that has ever been produced has been made since the year 2000. It's just been going up and up and up and up. Demand is growing. We use it for so much. It's usually easier to say what we don't use it in. As you can see, this growth is continued. It's forecasted to keep going up and up and up, which is going to cause problems. So what do we use it for? If I gave you all, there's a few of you here, if I gave you all some time, you'd probably all come up with various different ones. You can pop some in the chat quickly if you'd like. What do we use plastic for? Food and drink packaging, definitely. Clothing, polyester, yeah, that's a common one. Your lunchbox. Toys, medical equipment, that's a very important one. People often forget medical equipment is often made of plastic. Wet wipes, medical devices. So as I said, lots of different things people can think of, and some of them are really important to us. We wouldn't get up on as well as we do without some of these things. For example, medical equipment, we need that to get by. So here's a table that shows the different types of plastic and different things we use them for. So plastic bags, clothes. There's so many different types, so many different things. It is, as I said, universal. It's everywhere. There it is. Sorry, couldn't find the thing. So single-use plastic. That's a lot of the ones we discussed. These might look like straws. These are not straws. These, the little earbuds that we used to get, the cotton tips, clean your ears with, they used to have plastic containers, middle bit, sorry. These were all found in roughly a metre square of seaweed on a beach in Cumbria. They were all stuck in this tiny little area of seaweed because people would flush them down the toilet and they would come out into the sea and end up in the seaweed on the beaches. Obviously, we've got things like cutlery and bowls and bottles. Then we've got coffee cups, straws, balloons, polystyrene food boxes, and so many more like the ones you mentioned. It's estimated that 50% of the plastic we produce is used for single-use items. Single-use doesn't necessarily mean use once and throw it away. It means it has a shelf life of shorter than 4 months. So food packaging and things like that. It isn't used for long, but it lasts forever, basically, is the worrying thing about single-use plastic. And so much of our plastic that we are producing is going to making these items. So I've got some fun facts. I feel like after this presentation, you're going to want me to reevaluate my idea of what fun is. I can understand why you might think that. So plastic, it accounts for 3.4% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Depending on who you are, that might sound like a lot or not a lot. It's not ideal either way. Only 9% of plastic waste is recycled. 15% globally is collected for recycling. However, 40% of that is lost along the way during the process. So technically only 9% of it is recycled. 19% is incinerated, 50% ends up in landfill, and 22% of it evades waste management systems altogether. So these are where we don't have effective waste management, where it's taken into the desert and burnt, where it just gets into the marine environment, it's litter. That's an awful lot. I now have some more fun facts for you because so globally, 1 million plastic bottles are purchased every minute. 5 trillion plastic bags are used every year, and 500 billion plastic cups are used every year. I said, sorry, that's 5 trillion plastic bags, not 5 billion plastic bags. That's, an awful lot of plastic we are using. So we're going to do some fun maths now together. So hopefully we're going to, obviously I just said 1 million plastic bottles are sold every minute. These are not all going to be 500 milliliter Coca-Cola bottles, but I assume most people know what a 500 milliliter Coca-Cola bottle looks like and its rough dimensions. So if you could guess, if you took a Coca-Cola bottle, you put it on the floor, end to end, how far do you think 1 million of them would reach? How many kilometers? So there are your options: 100 kilometers, 175 kilometers, 220 kilometers, or 255 kilometers. Oh, it seems we're all around the 220 to 255 kilometers range. Okay. So, Coca-Cola bottle, 22 centimeters long, would go 220 kilometers. So well done to anyone who says that. That little red dot on the map, that's Walton Hall, where the OU headquarters are. Some of you might even be sitting there right now. I'm currently sitting here in Norfolk, so it would go way past me. In fact, we could go visit York, Bradford, all the way into Wales. So, and that goes a long way, and that's in a minute. So how long would it take us with every minute that getting longer and longer? How long would it take us to get around the globe? The globe is, the circumference of the globe is there. So have a quick guess what you think. Is it 2 hours and 47 minutes, 3 hours and 21 minutes, 4 hours and 17 minutes, or 5 hours and 6 minutes? You can pop some guesses in the chat. I should have labeled them A, B, C, or D, really. That would have been easier, wouldn't it? 3 hours and 21 minutes is correct. I don't know if you were very good at guess or you did some maths, whichever it was. Your maths is fine. So yeah, if you kept laying out those plastic bottles before we'd even reached the 4-hour mark, we'd already be around the circumference of the globe, which is quite alarming in my opinion. So we've looked globally. I'm going to have a little look at the United Kingdom. We use over 5 million tons of plastic each year in the UK. And we only recycle about 45% of this. Obviously, that's above the global average of 9%, but considering we've been now having a war against plastic for a while, it's still not ideal, and those numbers do need to go up. We use 7.7 billion plastic bottles per year. So that's basically an average of 117 bottles per person annually. The fact underneath, I did not update that one. So this is an old fact. We used to use 13 billion carrier bags annually. Obviously, that changed when we brought in the 5p levy, which I believe now is 10p. I haven't bought a plastic bag in a very long time, though, so I don't actually remember. Anyway, that is incorrect now, which we will look at later when we look at how things have changed. Some more fun maths for you, because I am a lovely person. So we use 5 million tons of plastic each year. What percentage of global plastic are we using? Oops, went too forward. So are we using 0.09%, 0.3%, 0.9%, or 1.1%? A real mix here. Okay, well, it's actually 1.1%, which might not sound a lot, might sound a lot. Bear in mind, our population accounts for 0.84% of the global population. So, you know, we're using a lot more than we should if all things were equal. Plastics can be split up and defined by their size. When I first started studying plastic pollution in 2016, this did not exist. A microplastic was anything below 5 millimeters. Thankfully, and then everybody else had different opinions on what it was and different definitions. That was really great fun when I was researching for my dissertation because nobody could agree, even though this is a problem we've been aware about since at least the 70s. Finally, we've seemed to agree on this one, which gets it more in line with other microphysics, as it were, microparticles, etc. So a macroplastic is a large piece of plastic, anything over 1 centimeter. I don't know if this is said meso or meso, I do apologize. Meso or mesoplastic is 1 to 10 millimeters. Microplastics, then you are looking at 1 to 1,000 micrometers, and then nanoplastics, you cannot see with the naked eye, you need a microscope. Because they are 0.001 to 1 micrometer. They're tiny. But I'm very glad we have a set sort of definition now. I feel like, however, this was from an article where they were proposing a new way of measuring what different plastics are. So whether we'll actually ever agree on something it seems to be up in the air. So microplastics. Microplastics is obviously what I studied the most. And they're obviously a big area of research at the moment. So they can be either categorized as primary or secondary plastics. Primary microplastics were created as microplastics, such as nurdles. So the picture you have on this slide is a nurdle. Nurdles are basically what bigger pieces of plastic are made from. So they will take hundreds and hundreds and thousands of nurdles and roll them out into other pieces of plastic. Secondary microplastics were larger plastics, which have broken down into smaller pieces through a combination of photodegradation, oxidation, and mechanical abrasion. Plastic left out in the environment becomes very brittle very quickly, so it actually doesn't take a lot to make it fall apart. So this was a mustard bottle I found on a beach in Egypt. It'd been out in the sun and the sea, and all I did was close my hand. I didn't put any strength into that, and as you can see, it came apart into thousands of tiny pieces. That is essentially a very, very rapidly increased way of breaking plastics down into secondary microplastics. It happens naturally over time in the environment. Look, obviously we are concentrating a lot more on marine issues because that's what I've studied. It is not only a marine issue. Plastic affects everything around the world. It's been found everywhere, from Arctic ice to the bottom of the depths of the ocean. There is no escaping plastic in the environment now, unfortunately. But how much of it's entering the ocean? You'll hear me say this a lot. Nobody is really sure. We're not entirely sure. We can make best guess, we can make educated guesses from research, but we can't know like down, 100%. It's not possible to know that. But of all the litter that's entering the ocean, 80 to 85% of it is comprised of plastic. So it's a big issue. Jambeck et al., they estimated it's more than 10 million tonnes. The IUCN estimates 14 million tonnes. You'll see estimates as low as 4.8 million. You'll see as high as 18 million. It really, really varies. I gave 2 different ones there. As I said, we don't have an accurate number, but we know it's a lot more than it should be. Let's have some more fun maths here. Obviously, biggest animal that ever lived, is still living, is our blue whale. They weigh roughly 130,000 to 150,000 kilograms. They're big. So I've got a fun maths question for you here. I've converted US tons into kilograms for you. Bear in mind, we're going to use 140,000. Yeah, 140,000 is the median weight of blue whales. How many blue? Sorry, my Alexa just started speaking. How many blue whales worth of weight do you think that amount here is? 9 million odd kilograms. Is it 43,916, 48,390, 59,257, or 64,799 blue whales in equivalents? You can pop some answers in the chat. Have a guess. You can label them A, B, C, and D. I should have done that. So 43,000 can be A, 48,000 B, so on. Good guesses. A real mix of guesses again. So the answer, D. That was D, right? 64,799 blue whale equivalents going into our ocean, which is very depressing when you know that the blue whale population is estimated to be 10,000 to 25,000. So the weight of litter going to our ocean every year weighs more by a lot than our actual blue whale population, and these are the biggest animals on the planet. I promise it's not all this depressing. How does plastic enter the ocean? Well, most research has suggested 80% of it comes from land-based sources. So litter that isn't managed properly, litter that's thrown on the floor, litter that gets into rivers, flash floods. Basically, we're finding that extreme weather conditions are also causing a big uptick of litter getting into the oceans. High winds will blow things into the oceans, into the seas, into the rivers. If it gets into the sewers, it can get into our rivers and therefore into our oceans. So much of it is coming from land-based sources. Then you're looking at 18% from the fishing industry, and then 2% from other being things like shipping and things like that. Littering at sea has been made illegal. It's banned under MARPOL Article 5. But that hasn't stopped it. And more research is suggesting that actually, even though dumping at sea is illegal, it's actually accounting for a lot more of the litter that we're finding washed up on beaches than we initially thought. So these numbers are likely to need to be revised. It will probably be found that actually 80% isn't coming from land. A lot more of it is coming from cargo ships that are dumping illegally. Obviously, some of it happens by accident. Cargo ships lose cargo all the time by accident, and some of that will open up and it will escape into the marine environment. And unfortunately, for the way things are right now, that can't be avoided. But if we could stop the illegal dumping, that would certainly help. As for land-based sources, simple things such as just getting grates over drains can help reduce litter getting into our water system. What's interesting, we found research has recently shown is that high-earning companies, we produce a lot more plastic, we use a lot more plastic, but because there is the infrastructure in place, a lot of it isn't actually getting into the environment. So, for instance, America, you can see, is on the lowest end of the scale. They produce a lot of plastic, they use a lot of plastic, but it's not getting to the marine environment. Compare that to other countries that are low-income countries or medium-income countries. They use a lot less plastic than we do, but they don't have that infrastructure in place to prevent it getting into the sea. And so that is what is basically causing the bigger issue here, is that they don't have that infrastructure yet. A lot of people are working on getting them that infrastructure, but it is something that takes time. The UK is an interesting one because we're considered a high-earning country, and yet we are not. We are actually one level above where most other ones are. It could be because we're a small island and therefore with a high population, therefore lots getting in. But as this is per capita, I don't know if that excuse really flies. So again, we'd have to look more into why there's so much plastic from the UK getting into the ocean. I just put a comparison in here of plastic litter found in freshwater systems, in European ones, and then litter most commonly found on beaches around the world. It's been argued that if so much of the waste on the land is what's getting into the sea, then the data from litter picks on the land and freshwater should be very similar to ones that are found on beaches. As you can see, the top three, they're not in the same order, but they're the same thing. So cigarette butts, food wrappers, plastic bottles. These have been done by different people. The data has been compiled by different people, so they use different things. For instance, on the one on the left, we've just got plastic bags, but on the one on the right, they've divided plastic bags with other plastic bags. So it's not a direct comparison, but it gives us a rough idea that, yeah, it looks like a lot of the litter that we're finding in our freshwater and on land is what's ending up on our beaches. So most of the litter is probably still coming from land. It's just not as much as we thought. I did put a warning in here. I do have some distressing photos. And there is a video. The video, that makes it sound a lot more graphic than it actually is. The video is of a reef that has unfortunately been killed by copious amounts of fishing line. I find it distressing. You may too. The environmental impact of plastic. You've probably seen some of it. You've probably seen a video of a turtle with a plastic straw up its nose, or you've seen pictures, or you've seen videos. It's everywhere. We're getting a lot more awareness about this subject now. So you might see it on TV, you might see it on a nature documentary, you might see it on social media. People are beginning to share it. So the environmental impact this is a very short list in comparison to all the other things, but we would be here all day. So there's entanglement and ghost fishing, smothering, ingestion, transport of invasive species, transport of contaminants, reduction in amenity value, and contamination of food are just a very small part of this list. So ingestion, in eating it causes horrific problems. I mean, a diet of plastic isn't good for anyone. It causes external wounds, it causes internal wounds, it can cause blockages, it can impair feeding capacity. If your stomach is full of plastic that it can't break down, you're not going to be able to eat as much and you are going to slowly waste away. And it also causes a reduction in reproductivity. You're not going to feel up to making eggs if your body's full of plastic. So I've just got there's lots and lots of facts, but this one I found particularly alarming. 97.5% of lace and albatross chicks have plastic pieces in their stomach. That's yeah. As you can see, the picture of the fish, even they're getting microplastics into them. So many species have been found to contain microplastics now. Even algae, even at the bottom of the food chain, it's getting into everything. So this is a video I took in Egypt. Very clearly, you can tell which one is the plastic bag. It's the one on the right. The other two are moon jellyfish. That's very clear to us. It's very shallow water. It's very bright, but it's not quite so easy under the sea. Myself, I've been diving 40 meters under the sea. I've gone to grab what I thought is a plastic bag, only to have to drag my hand away very quickly because it's actually a jellyfish. Under low light conditions, it gets so much harder to tell the difference. It's estimated that 52% of the world's turtles have eaten plastic waste. Over half. Loggerhead turtles, they hunt jellyfish, and it seems like they mistakenly eat plastic about 17% of the time they encountered it. This actually goes up for green turtles who are searching for algae, so it's not just jellyfish they're getting mistaken for, and it's not just plastic bags that are causing the issue. They consume plastic 62% of the time they encountered it. And the bit that is most death occurs after consuming one plastic item 22% of the time. So nearly a quarter of the time a turtle eats a piece of plastic one time, it could potentially kill them. Then entanglement, this one probably seen photos of before. This is one of the reasons why I really hate helium balloons. I've collected a fair few from the beaches and coasts of the UK. They end up with the bottom right picture that a bird got entangled in a string from a helium balloon. So strangulation, obviously, it can cause skin lesions. If you get something wrapped around you, it causes ulcerating body wounds. It interrupts feeding. You're not going to be able to catch your prey if you are wrapped in plastic. And also you can't avoid predators. I mean, if you're wrapped in, obviously for the seal on the left, if you are wrapped in that amount of stuff, you're not getting away from predators. And obviously if you're a mammal, you do need to breathe air. So if you are stuck with that amount around you, you will drown. Plastics we're also finding are being collected by seabirds to use in their nest building, and that is killing chicks from entanglement quite quickly. So this is a video I took when I was in Egypt. This was used to be a very vibrant coral reef. And this was by the local city, which was 15 kilometers away. It was a local fishing spot. The way of fishing there was they would take a piece of fishing line, they would wrap it around the end of their finger and they would throw it into the water. If it got stuck on the reef, which it often did, they would just, you're not going to be able to pull it out again, so it got left. This basically wrapped itself around the coral. It smothered it, essentially, entangled it. The coral started dying. There is some living coral in there still hanging on. There is some fish still there, but compared to the other reefs that were nearby, that was dead and lifeless. Transport of invasive species and contaminants. So this is the bit of plastic that alarms me the most, actually, which we'll get into. They can facilitate the long distance transfer of non-native potentially invasive species. So recently, it was this year, in fact, a large piece of plastic was found off the south coast, and it was found on that plastic there was crustaceans from the tropics on it. What's interesting, though, is that using our knowledge of how those crustaceans grow and their life cycle, and we can judge where it came from and how long it'd been traveling in the water. So that's interesting, because we are using that to model how things travel, but also bringing invasive species over, that's less great. We already have a lot of our native wildlife is struggling against invasive wildlife. Crayfish, for example, the American crayfish outcompete our native crayfish. So that's not ideal. But the bit I find most alarming is adsorption. So adsorption is essentially when chemicals and contaminants create like a film over microplastics, or over anything, not just microplastics, but specifically for this example, microplastics. Microplastics make a great area for absorption because they have a surface roughness, they're quite porous. You know, they're like the perfect place for absorption to occur. So microplastics can take on all matter of things. They can take on heavy metals. They can take on persistent organic pollutants, which sounds terrifying, but they are often listed as POPs, which sounds less terrifying. And other various chemicals they can take on like a film over them. It's also been shown that because it's particularly porous, they can take on viruses, so they can become a vector. What is alarming to me about this is that they take on this film, and then if something ingests them, they're taking on everything that's in that film. And because we've found microplastics in the base of the food web, or the food pyramid, or however you wish to look at it, that's now in all those things that have been absorbed into the plastic, the heavy metals, the pollutants, they're now getting into the food web, which scares me ever so slightly. Obviously, we know plastic lasts a long time. These are estimated decomposition rates. We don't know for sure. Plastic hasn't been around 500 years. So we don't know, this is definitely how long they are going to last, but this is our best guess from what we can work out from understanding how their components break down, basically. So some examples here: plastic bottles, potentially 450 years, cigarette butts, 1 to 5 years. People often wonder why cigarette butts are included on this. Cigarette butts do in fact include plastic in them. But there is an argument to be had that plastic never truly goes away. Sure, it breaks down until you can no longer see it, but the pieces are just getting smaller and smaller and smaller until they become nanoplastics. So as it might be gone from view, but it might not be gone forever, and it might still be causing problems. So yeah, things last a very, very long time from our best guess. So where does it go in the ocean? It's estimated that only 1% of microplastics actually float. The rest either sinks to the bottom or it stays in the water column. But where does it go when it's on the surface? Well, the ocean, they have large rotating currents, which are called gyres. This is a map of the 5 main gyres of the ocean. You might have heard of the North Pacific gyre under a different name. You might have heard of it referred to as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may have not. We can't agree on the size of the garbage patch. this is a general theme throughout this talk. We can't agree on much, but we agree it's bad. That's something, right? Some people think it's about the size of Texas. Some people say France. The general accepted size is 1,600,000 square kilometers. 1,600,000 square kilometers, which is twice the size of Texas or 3 times the size of France. So it's pretty big. Pretty big. But again, some people say that's a vast over-exaggeration and we're just trying to scare people, and other people go, no, it's so much bigger than that. But what is sort of accepted is that it's estimated to contain 1.8 trillion pieces of plastic, which is, I'm not even going to try and do a fun maths for that, because that's beyond, yeah, that blows my mind. So why do we have a problem defining the garbage patch? When people think of the garbage patch, they think of this. In fact, if you Google garbage patch, this image will come up a lot. However, this isn't the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. This is actually a photo from a harbour. So we think it looks like this. We think it's all this massive bits of plastic floating on the top. But it actually looks more like this, which is referred to as a plastic soup. Much of the plastic doesn't float on the top. Bits that do often are very small. And a lot of it is actually in the water column or has already sunk down. So yeah, it doesn't look quite as alarming, and which is why it's so much harder to try and work out the size of the garbage patch. So all that was very alarming, very depressing, very distressing. So why I needed a break from it. I agree, Rachel. You're not wrong. But there are things we can do. Even small things. Not to quote whatever supermarket is, but every little helps. I forget which supermarket that is. So something as simple as litter picking, it really can make a difference. So this one on the left was a litter pick on Lake Windermere. The one on the right is a litter pick on a beach in Egypt, and the one in the middle, obviously not everybody can dive. It's a luxury to be able to dive, really. But that was a reef clean. You don't need to be able to do anything massive. Sorry, the dog is trying to dig up the car. Sorry about that. You can just go outside right now with a litter picker and pick up a few items. Even that makes a difference, because you are stopping those items from reaching the sea. You can look online and find beach cleans with charities. You can find like-minded groups. You can just go for a walk and do it. It's really simple. Not everything has to be a massive achievement. Like, you don't have to be like, oh, I made a beach clean with 200 people or 2,000 people. Just doing every little, even just a few bits yourself, it does make a difference. Reduce, reuse, recycle. You've probably, if you've done a lot of green workshops, you've probably had this message driven home a lot, but it does again help. We struggle to remove plastic from the ocean at the moment. And even if we did find a way to start dragging it out easily, it's not going to help, because it's still going back in. We need to start reducing the amount of plastic we use. As we've mentioned earlier, recycling isn't a completely 100% effective. We lose 40% of it along the way. So the biggest thing we can do is reduce how much plastic we use. There's various ways of doing that, some of which we'll cover as we go through this. But for instance, there's a plastic water bottle. It is again plastic, but it's not one use. You're not going to use that plastic water bottle on the left and then chuck it in the bin after one use, I hope. It's reusable. Then there's like the reusable mugs instead of the paper mugs or the plastic mugs. Surface Against Sewage made a very helpful boycott single-use plastics. Obviously, it's not possible to always avoid single-use plastics. So don't beat yourself up if sometimes it can't be avoided, or you forgot your reusable mug, or it happens. The fact that you're trying is what's important. The fact that you're willing to try and make a difference is what's important. This is a bit out of date now. This one was from 2019. But obviously the laws have changed, and things like plastic straws and plastic stirrers aren't really allowed so much anymore. But yeah, try if you can. It's, as I said, not always possible, but if you can avoid the single-use plastic, then that's you. Again, you're helping. Vote with your wallet. This one is can be what's the word I am looking for? Controversial. That's the word I'm looking for, because not everybody has the luxury to do this. It is almost a privilege to be able to vote with your wallet. When I was a student, I knew the bad impacts plastic was making, but I didn't have a lot of money, so I was going to buy the cheapest food, even if it was wrapped in plastic, because I needed to eat. Again, if you're in that situation, don't beat yourself up. You're doing what you can, and we appreciate that. So if you do have the ability, look for the food that doesn't come wrapped in plastic. Buy a reusable mug. You can save money at some places. That one on the right comes from Costa. If you take a reusable mug to a Costa, they'll give you 25p off your drink. Same with Starbucks. I think different chains do different things. I know there's a chain that gives you 2 stamps on your loyalty card instead of 1 if you take a reusable mug. Obviously, as well, this does get controversial, greenwashing and things like that, because if you've got multiple companies offering you the same product, various companies do various bad things to the environment, and it can be very, very difficult to navigate those waters. But do what you can. You can join environmental charities or non-profits. You don't even need to give, if you can't afford to donate, you don't need to donate. You can give your time. If you can't afford to give your time, you can just do something as simple as share one of their projects on social media. Gaining awareness helps. These are just a couple I've picked. There are hundreds of things out there. You just have a look on Google, have a look at what's closest to you, what you agree with most. So Less Surface Against Sewage, I've mentioned a few times, who I worked with, they are aiming to make plastic-free communities. They work with local businesses and local councils to make pledges against using disposable plastic. Kids Against Plastic, I love them. They're not just, they are kids for kids, run by kids, but obviously adults are welcome too, and adults are involved because kids can't completely run a business, but they do all sorts of little things. They get kids together for a club where they call every Saturday on Zoom. They do all sorts of little things. They have a thing called Kids Against Tat, which I think it really tickles me, but they basically are campaigning against magazines putting little plastic toys on the front of their covers, because it's wasteful. But yeah, so if you've got kids, maybe that's something to look into. There's Less Plastic. They are actually a non-profit. They look at raising awareness of ocean plastic and practical ways for individuals and organisations to make a difference. They also have a pledge you can take. So there's all sorts going on there. And then PAPP is People Against Plastic Pollution. They run beach cleans. I think they're based down in Devon, but they do run beach cleans all around. They often try and get to more remote areas that other beach cleans might not be able to get to. So, that's what they promote. They promote beach cleans, organising beach cleans. These were just 4, but there's so many out there. Campaigning. Campaigning doesn't necessarily mean joining a protest or holding a placard up. There's lots of different things out there. This is just a few I picked from around the world. So, End Plastic Pollution. They are run by earthday.org, and they are trying to get people to sign up. You can go sign up now if you fancy. They want people to sign a petition for a global plastic treaty. So does Rethink Plastic. That's part of their campaigning. They basically want the world to agree on a treaty for how we're going to deal with the ever-growing problem of plastic. They have lots of campaigns going on, as do Rethink Plastic. I really appreciated the campaign done by I Support Ban Plastics KE. That was started by one man in Kenya. He worked as a photojournalist, and he went around Kenya with a sign that said, "I support Ban Plastics KE," and he handed it to people and took their photo while they were standing near rubbish. And it took off. It went viral on Twitter. So much so that one of the minister for the Secretary for Environment and Natural Resources even retweeted it with her support. And it was so successful that Kenya went on to ban plastic bags in 2017, making them one of the first countries to do so, all because one man just went, you know what, I'm going to make this happen. I mean, I'm not saying we'd all have that luck. I think we've all tried to do something at one point which hasn't gone as we expected, but I really admire that he did that. Rethink Plastic, as I mentioned, they do a lot of campaigns they run that you can sign or you can read about. They are alliance of leading European NGOs, and they represent a lot of different groups and supporters. They also are promoting the Global Plastic Treaty, and they are trying to get people to think about how they use plastic, and they're trying to figure out ways to end the global plastic demand. Plastic bag diet. So this one was particularly interesting to me. This was in Indonesia. How it started was people would walk up to people who are carrying plastic bags, take them away and replace said bag with a reusable plastic bag. Please do not leave this talk thinking I'm telling you to do that. I don't think that would not go well, I don't imagine. Please don't go take people's plastic bags, and even if you are replacing them with a reusable bag. But it was effective, and they actually did raise a lot of awareness in the Philippines. They also do outreach and education. They started doing plastic tours for people who didn't believe that plastic was a problem. They would take them to plastic-choked rivers and show them the dangers that plastic was actually causing. And again, they've been successful. Within 3 months of starting one of their campaigns, which was Pay for Plastic, which was the idea of, having a levy for plastic bags or a plastic tax. Within 3 months, they were doing trials in 27 cities around Indonesia, and now 34 cities around Indonesia ban plastic bags. So again, campaigning doesn't have to be massive. It can start very small, and it can become very successful. There is so many different things you can do. And things do change. It does sound so awful, but everybody working together can make things change and can make lasting change. These, just in the UK and just in England, no, this is all of the UK, but mainly England, is a far-reaching ban on single-use plastics is coming to effect in 2023. Places won't be able to use disposable plastic bowls and disposable plastic this, that, and the other. But unless there is a cravat, there's always a cravat, unless it's made for ready to go. So supermarkets still will be able to, things like that. But carrier bag the charges, as I said earlier, the number that was on there was wrong. I think it said 13 trillion. That was before this came in. We introduced the 5p levy, and that reduced bag usage by 85%. 97% in the biggest supermarket retailers, but 85% overall. So that shows what us, scientists gathering data and people campaigning for change can achieve. We can achieve incredible things together. We brought in a ban on microbeads that were in things like dish soap and hand wash and things like that. And we've had a ban on plastic straws and stirrers and cotton buds. So things like that will make a difference. And it's not just in the UK. It's around the world. So here we've got Canada, we've got France, we've got Fiji, we've got Victoria and Australia. They've all brought in various bans of various different plastic pollutants. Here's a graph now of not a graph, sorry, a map. This is a map of all the different ways places that have put bans on plastic bags. A lot of island nations obviously have, because island nations and plastic bags don't mix very well. This has all come from people going, we need to do something. Plastic bags, specifically in this case, are bad for the environment, and we can do without them. And so, if nothing else, I know a lot of this was very, very harsh and depressing to think about, but things are changing. We are making changes happen. And I think that's what you need to take away from this. Things can get better. We can make things better. So anybody have any questions after our very whistle-stop tour of plastic pollution?
If anybody would like to ask Lucy any questions, then you can pop your hand up and we can come to you and take the microphone and cameras, put them on for you, or just pop your questions in the chat if you have anything you'd like to share, any sort of big wins, little wins that you've achieved with sort of like your plastic consumption, or has this inspired you to make a change? So have a little think and do ask any questions while Lucy is available to answer them. But I think we all agree that was a really sort of fascinating talk and thought-provoking, because as I say, you just think sometimes when you're recycling, you're actually, you're doing what you can, but equally, like, there is only so much that can be done, and there is a lot of plastic that can't be, and that just ends up there. And you think, oh, if we cleared the oceans, would that be better? But no, it's a constant thing that the plastic keeps going into the oceans. So there is a lot of problems. And the only way that realistically I think we can do things is to actually reduce our consumption as much as is feasible and as I say, nothing's perfect, no one's perfect, but you only do what you can, it seems. Suzanne says that some of those figures that you mentioned, some of the stats are eye-watering.
Yeah, I often find when I first started doing these talks, I've been doing them since 2016. Where I would say these big numbers and it wouldn't mean much to people, so that's why I started trying to put in the fun, in quotation marks, maths, to make people think about it in a way they could understand. So like, I don't imagine everybody can like imagine what a blue whale does weigh, like, but that probably makes more sense to somebody than like, oh, it's this much in, like, it's billions and millions of tons. So
yeah, it's trying to make it comparable, really, just so you can actually really appreciate. And it's sometimes just hearing things in that different way to make you actually then truly appreciate. Actually, I can imagine that, and that sounds horrific. Lorraine asks, is using a water filter jug better than buying bottles and recycling them? Obviously tap water is better, but not always nice.
I would say it would vary, I imagine, but I would say yes, because they last longer than one use. You get multiple uses out of them. You're getting more use out of it than one plastic bottle, and they can be recycled. There are places that do recycle them, and yes, I agree, tap water can be pretty horrific. There are places in the world where obviously tap water is not safe to drink, and that's another issue we have to address before we can't get rid of plastic bottles while people still can't drink their tap water. So
there's certainly a lot of there's discrepancies all across the world with economics, politics, and all that. It's it makes this sort of battle against climate change and everything even more difficult, because it is unfair for some people, some countries that don't have the technology that we have and things like that, so it makes it so tricky. And then they're the ones, unfortunately, in poorer countries, they are the ones that suffer as a result as well. So it is horrific. Varsha said, supermarkets now recycling food wrappings. I've seen a sign saying to recycle soft plastics only. Can you clarify this, as there are so many different types of food plastic bags?
A lot of supermarkets have now started putting on the back of their plastic wrapping whether they can be recycled at supermarkets now, which I'm very glad for, because I agree that was that again. Sorry, I got distracted by something popping into the chat. So yeah, they are starting to put them on, which is helpful because it was very confusing. So my advice is just to look on the back of your plastic wrapping and basically saying, can it be recycled at a supermarket? I agree. It's very difficult to know for sure, unfortunately.
And Rachel asks, is there hope that we can get companies to take some responsibility for the waste generated? When the local town had a new McDonald's open, the roads are now covered with branded litter.
Yeah, I'm very cynical, so I might not be the best person to ask that question of. I would like the answer to be yes, definitely hope we can make that happen, but yeah, I understand 100% where you're coming from, Rachel, and I've had similar thoughts. I would love it if we could make companies responsible for the litter they've generated. Some places have been trying to, but yeah, no, I agree with you. Something does need to be done there.
And finally, we've got from Ross. He says, any thoughts on the... Oh, my screen just moved. Bear with me.
No worries.
Any thoughts on the recent study showing that plastic recycling plants generate large quantities of microplastics? There's a link there to the Guardian. So yeah, if you're aware of any...
I had not seen that, and I do appreciate you showing me that, actually. I'm not that surprised. Obviously, as I said, it's not that efficient recycling plastic, and I am more concerned about microplastics than I am larger pieces in many ways. I think we need to do a lot of research into how we can do this more effectively. It's really not ideal. There isn't unfortunately, plastic, there is no easy win. There is no solution that ticks all the boxes. It's a bit of a nightmare. and you then have to figure out what is the greater evil. Unfortunately, I hate that we're in that situation. I hope one day that we're not. I hope one day we can go, oh, this is an effective solution. It has no downsides. But yeah, that everything we do with plastic has a downside, unfortunately. And unfortunately, we can't just stop producing it tomorrow. That's not going to happen either.
Absolutely. Unfortunately. Jane said, are there things we can do to prevent microfibers and plastics from washing machines?
Yeah, as Holly said underneath, there are bags you can buy, and there is who is it? One of the big charities is currently campaigning and trying to work with washing machine makers to install filters. So I'm hoping they'll be successful in the future. And I'm trying to think if it's the Marine Conservation Agency or something like that. Anyway, one of them is currently working with the makers trying to get these filters put on, so it's not something that we have to worry about our end. So here's hoping, but yeah, those bags are meant to help.
Perfect. I think that's everything. So someone's just popped a link there for an online shop that might be helpful to stop microplastics. And also Holly just mentioned that a lot of sportswear is plastic based. There's a lot of things that you just don't always realise it's got plastic in there.
Yeah, there's so many items you don't realise that have plastic in, and then you're like, oh, there it is.
No, but thank you so much for that, Lisa. That's really inspiring, and it's created a bit of thought-provoking chat as well. So that's been really useful, and I think people will come away from this and actually sort of see what else they can do to perhaps reduce their plastic consumption, or maybe just sort of look into doing some more litter picks or beach cleans, that kind of thing. So so that'd be really good if anyone wants to get involved with that. If you do get involved with that, do let us know, because it will be nice to sort of share that with the Go Green champions and on the Go Green network, so that we can share that good work that you're doing if you do choose to do anything like that. So always just shout about it, and we'll pop you in the newsletter, pop you on Yammer or Viva Engage. I think that's what it's called now. But
somebody shot in a message asking if it's recorded, and it was, wasn't it?
Yep. And you just reminded me I need to cancel. I need to stop the recording. So we'll call it there. But thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming.